I smoothed the sleeves of my $25 blazer from the clearance rack and slid into my usual seat at the Pacific Trust Capital weekly meeting in San Diego. As always, my older brother Brandon didn't so much as glance in my direction, too busy showing off his Omega watch and boasting about his latest achievement. Closed a $600 million Cense deal this morning, he announced, practically glowing as he spoke to the eager associates around the table. Third one this quarter. Not bad for a 36-year-old. Huh? I took a sip of my coffee, suppressing the smile that threatened to spread across my face. If only they knew. If only they realized that the deals he so proudly claimed as his own had been carefully crafted by me, positioning assets, feeding him just enough information, and letting his ego take all the credit. I'm Naomi Keller. Or, to most people at Pacific Trust, Nia Kendall, the quiet, unassuming contract analyst on the 10th floor. What they don't know is that I'm also the founder and CEO of ArcLight Equity Group, a global private equity firm that has been outpacing Pacific Trust for the last 5 years. Nia. Brandon's voice snapped me out of my thoughts. Those valuation briefs, my office. Noon. And try not to screw them up this time. I nodded politely. Of course, Mr. Killer. 10 years ago, I would have snapped back, but I've since learned the value of being underestimated. It all started right here, in this very boardroom. I was 24, fresh out of Stanford's MBA program, eager, full of ambition, and ready to shake things up. I thought I had a lot to offer. Private equity is about finding value in overlooked places, I said, addressing my Uncle Charles, who was CEO at the time. It's about focusing on long-term impact, not just short-term gains. Save us the lecture, Brandon interrupted. Why don't you stick to color-coding charts? You're good at that. Uncle Charles chuckled. Your father used to talk like that too. And where did that get him? My father, David Keller, died when I was 13. Branded the family failure for wanting to build something sustainable rather than exploit markets. The truth? He was on the brink of securing a game-changing deal when a plane crash took him from us. That moment marked the beginning of my quiet rebellion. I realized I'd never be taken seriously as long as I carried the Keller name. That night, I wired every cent of my $48,000 savings into forming ArcLight Equity Group, a company that would carry my father's legacy into a new era. The only person who ever truly believed in me was my maternal grandmother, Margaret Ellis. She used to say, "Let them overlook you. It's easier to strike when they're not looking," a sentiment I've never forgotten. For appearances, I kept my junior position at Pacific Trust Capital, but every night, in the solitude of my small one-bedroom apartment in Hillcrest, I built something much bigger. The first year almost broke me, 80-hour workweeks, spreadsheets by day, strategic modeling by night. I took my father's unfinished notes, his vision for an algorithm that could predict undervalued markets, and brought them to life. The early versions were clunky, but I stuck with it. And then, I saw it. A trend in Southeast Asia no one else had picked up on. While Brandon bragged about upgrading his fourth home with a private theater, I was investing small sums through ArcLight Equity. Within 6 months, those investments tripled. I lived like a broken turn, reinvesting every dollar back into the firm, always keeping a low profile. ArcLight exploded in growth, but no one, not Brandon, not Uncle Charles, knew the name behind it. I built a team of quiet rebels, former hedge funders, code geeks, ex-activists, people who were out to change the game, not just play it. And we did. One day, Mallory from HR leaned over the cubicle wall. You hear about ArcLight? Just bought Skonkum. They say it's the tech move of the year. I glanced up from my desk, cluttered with old reports and coffee-stained folders. Really? Huh? She laughed. You've been here a decade. You could at least ask for a window office. I smiled. I'm fine here. But I was winning. While they chased fame and recognition, I was reshaping entire industries from the shadows. The money? I could have bought a mansion in La Jolla or chartered a private jet to Milan. Instead, I kept my old Corolla and stayed quiet, while Uncle Charles once remarked in a meeting. That Naomi girl could learn something from ArcLight's founder, Elizabeth Clark. Now that's a visionary. He even held up a Forbes cover featuring an interview I'd done. An interview conducted from my dimly lit home office, disguised with a slightly deeper voice and strategic contouring. 2 lives, 1 truth. But the weight of the double life was starting to take its toll. If Naomi's secret life has you hooked, don't forget to subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens when the truth finally comes face to face with the family that wrote her off. My apartment may have been modest, but it hid a secret few could imagine, a hidden room behind the closet, lined with encrypted servers, secure communication systems, and a soundproof wall for confidential calls. My sick days at Pacific Trust Capital were always perfectly timed with ArcLight's executive meetings. I maintained 2 completely separate wardrobes. Naomi Keller wore discounted department store clothes and worn-out flats. But Elizabeth Clark? She wore sharp, minimalist suits tailored in Milan, only when the CEO had to make a rare public appearance. The double life weighed on me. There were days I wanted to walk into Brandon's office, throw my quarterly reports on his desk, rip off the blazer, and reveal who I truly was, just to watch their smug expressions crumble. But I knew better. Power isn't just about telling the truth. It was never just about truth. It was about timing. And that timing had finally arrived. Just last week, Brandon had burst into the bullpen practically vibrating with excitement. "We're closing the biggest merger in firm history," he declared, breathless. Anderson Corp., $10 billion, deal of the decade. He had no idea that ArcLight Equity already held controlling shares in Anderson Corp. And the merger? It wouldn't go through without Elizabeth Clark's approval. For 10 years, I'd watched Brandon climb, clawing his way upward by stepping on backs and stealing credit. I wasn't here for revenge. I was here for something quieter, cleaner, final. The meeting was set for Friday. The entire Pacific Trust executive board would be in that room, brimming with anticipation to finally meet the mysterious Elizabeth Clark. They had no idea she'd been the one fetching their coffee for years. I glanced at the clock. Showtime. Gathering my purposefully messy folders, I tugged at the fraying cuff of my clearance rack blazer, one last costume change before the curtain lifted. "Keller," Brandon snapped, "where are those financials?" "Right here, Mr. Keller," I replied, voice even. One more week. One more act. A decade of late nights, anonymity, and strategic silence, all leading here. That morning, I walked into Pacific Trust Capital as Naomi Keller for the final time. Hair unstyled, shoes scuffed, face forgettable. Mollery passed by my desk. "Can you believe it? We finally meet Elizabeth Clark today." I smiled behind my screen. "Oh, I've heard she's particular." Brandon strutted past, his new Italian suit practically reflecting the overhead fluorescence. "Elizabeth Clark is going to be blown away," he announced, loud enough for the bullpen to hear. "This merger, it's legacy defining." If only he knew. At 9 a.m., I stood casually, stacking my reports. "Mr. Keller?" I called out just loud enough. "Not feeling great, might take the afternoon." He didn't even glance up. "Fine, just finish the reports." Instead of heading to the lobby, I keyed into the elevator's restricted access floor, straight to the private suite leased under a shell company. Within 30 minutes, Naomi Keller disappeared. In her place stood Elizabeth Clark. Gone were the worn flats and limp curls. My tailored navy suit fit like armor, hair pinned into a sleek chignon, eyes clear, posture sharp. At 1:55, I stood behind tinted glass, watching them gather. Brandon looked like a child on Christmas Eve. Uncle Charles checked his watch like it owed him money. My phone buzzed. A message from my assistant. "Cars ready. Private entrance secured." I closed my eyes for one breath, hearing my father's voice again. "Let your work speak. Don't just arrive, own the room." At exactly 2 o'clock, I stepped through the executive entrance. Silence collapsed over the room. Chairs shifted, eyes widened, a few jaws dropped. "Gentlemen," I said evenly, voice designed to land, "shall we begin?" Brandon sprang to his feet. "Miss Clark, we've been looking forward to discussing the Anderson." I walked past him, ignoring his outstretched hand. "Yes, I'm familiar with your ambitions." Uncle Charles leaned forward with a practiced smile. "We've prepared a full presentation. We're confident." "That won't be necessary." I placed my leather portfolio on the table and took the head seat. "I've already reviewed your materials." A pause. "In fact, I've been reviewing Pacific Trust's operations for quite some time. Brandon's smile faltered. Your business model is, I let the pause stretch, fascinating, particularly the part about taking credit for work you didn't do. That's when the real meeting began. Manipulating market positions, stifling innovation to preserve ego. That's not leadership. It's fear, dressed in a tailored suit. The room froze. Even the air conditioner seemed to go still. I don't understand, Brandon said, his voice cracking. Pacific Trust operates at the highest. Really? I opened my portfolio and slid a packet of documents across the table. Like when you claimed ownership of the Southeast Asia equity model, the one developed by a junior researcher you never promoted? My eyes locked onto his. Or the pattern of blocking career advancement for employees who outperformed you intellectually? Uncle Charles had gone pale. Miss Clark, he tried, voice weak, I can assure you. I raised a hand. Don't. Save it for someone who hasn't spent the last decade inside your walls. Confusion cracked into panic. And the reckoning had only just begun. Realization washed over them, slow and creeping. The weight of it settled in, undeniable. Uncle Charles's face twisted in horror. No, he breathed. It can't be. I smiled calmly, unhurried, slowly. I reached up and removed the contact lenses that had softened my eyes for all these years. The ones that had concealed who I truly was. Hello, Uncle Charles, I said. I turned to Brandon, who was still frozen, staring at me in confusion. Surprised to see your junior analyst sitting at this end of the table? I asked, my voice calm but laced with a satisfaction I couldn't suppress. Brandon blinked. Naomi, you can't be. Elizabeth Clark, I said, leaning back in my chair with an ease that felt like breathing. Founder and CEO of ArcLight Equity. Yes, for the last 10 years. While they had been busy overlooking the quiet, unassuming analyst, I had been building one of the most powerful equity firms in the industry. Around the room, the board members were stunned, some clearly impressed by the turn of events. This is a trick, Brandon muttered, his arrogance already showing signs of cracking. You're just careful, I said flatly, locking eyes with him. You're about to insult the woman who can tank your $10 billion merger with one sentence. That shut him up. I flipped open another folder, my fingers steady as I arranged the pages. Now, let's talk about what happens next. ArcLight Equity would not approve the merger, not as it stood. You can't do this, Uncle Charles said, his voice rising, but still unsure. The shareholders, I cut in, will be fascinated by the internal practices of this firm, unless we negotiate something better. For the next hour, I laid out my terms. A full restructuring. Brandon and Charles would step down. Promotions would be based on merit, not bloodlines. You planned this, Charles whispered, his voice faltering as his grip on power slipped away. I shook my head. No, I earned this. I've been building something real for a decade, I said quietly. This wasn't revenge. It was the natural conclusion. They filed out of the conference room, their shoulders sagging, defeated. Brandon lingered near the doorway. His posture was no longer the arrogant, brash figure I'd known. He was smaller now. Why? He asked, voice lacking its usual force. Why stay here pretending to be her? I finally met his eyes, the same eyes that had dismissed me for years. Because to fix a broken system, you have to see it from the inside, I said, my voice steady and clear. Everything ArcLight became, it came from watching what not to do. The next morning, the headlines exploded across every business outlet. Reclusive CEO Elizabeth Clark unmasked as Naomi Keller, analyst at Pacific Trust. Secret takeover completed. The market couldn't get enough. ArcLight's stock surged 20% in a single day. People loved the story of a billionaire who'd built her empire from a cubicle, a ghost in plain sight. I kept my old nameplate, Naomi Keller, market analyst, on the corner of my new desk, which now sat on the top floor of what had once been Pacific Trust's headquarters. Mallory stopped by last week, still trying to wrap her head around the revelation. All those times I told you to ask for a raise, she trailed off, still in disbelief. I laughed, the sound light but full of meaning. Consider yourself promoted. I need people who believed in Naomi, not just Elizabeth. Brandon and Uncle Charles quietly retired to spend time with family. Brandon's apparently writing a memoir about humility, though I doubted it would be accurate. At least he was finally writing his own words. And me? I finally bought a new blazer, but the old one, the frayed one, I keep hanging behind my door. It's a reminder that titles and power mean nothing without purpose. The company was thriving. It turns out, when you stop promoting people based on bloodlines and start rewarding actual merit, amazing things happen. We launched a mentorship program for overlooked employees, people like me, once invisible. Late one night, I passed a conference room and heard a young analyst presenting a brilliant proposal on inefficiencies in renewable infrastructure. Brandon would have written her off on sight. Wrong background, wrong last name. Instead, she's now leading our new sustainability division. You saw something in me, she said quietly after her promotion. No, I replied, I saw you. Sometimes, that's all people need, someone who sees past the surface. As for the merger, we approved a revised version, one that protected jobs, one that prioritized innovation. One that finally reflected the kind of company we were becoming. The business journals called it a masterclass in long-game strategy. I called it justice. My father's old walnut desk now sits in the corner of my office, refinished, restored, gleaming in the California sun. It's the same desk he once used in his tiny startup, before they called him a failure. On it, I keep two nameplates side by side, Elizabeth Clark, CEO. Naomi Keller, analyst. Both are me, both mattered. Just like success, it doesn't always wear a name tag or walk in through the front door. When people ask if I regret those 10 hidden years, I think about the wisdom they gave me. Every snide remark taught me empathy. Every time my voice was ignored, I learned how to amplify others. Every dismissal became momentum. So, no, I wouldn't change a thing. Sometimes, the most powerful companies are built in silence, by people no one bothered to see. And honestly, the expression on Brandon's face when he realized who I truly was, that was worth every forgotten coffee run and late night in a cubicle. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it walks in quietly, and takes the head seat at the table. If my story resonated with you, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below, share what part hit you the hardest. Or tell me about a time you were underestimated and kept going anyway. Because trust me, I know what it feels like to be overlooked, talked down to, and told to stay in your lane. But I also know what it means to rise quietly, to build in silence, and to let your results speak louder than their opinions ever could. If you believe in rooting for the ones no one saw coming, support this channel. Subscribe, comment, share this story. Help others see that not all success comes with applause. Sometimes it comes after years of grit, grace, and patience. And if you're in a season of being ignored right now, take heart. Use that time. Study the cracks in the system. Learn, grow, build your foundation, brick by quiet brick. One day, they'll look up and realize they should have paid attention long ago. Because sometimes, the greatest power move is to simply become everything they said you couldn't.